Palizaba, Atanamiga, no look about it. Dene Araka Media Crossobare. So, my name is Nwe Oo, Talizwa. I am host here at the Araka Media. Today's show is Burma, the endless war and political polarization. So, we are very delighted to introduce you, our special guest, Phil Robertson, from Human Rights Watch, Asia Division. Hi, Mr. Robertson. Welcome from Araka Media. Thanks for joining us today.
I'm very happy to be with you. Thanks for inviting me onto the show.
Thank you. So in 2020 general election, NLD was reported to have 82% of the votes, while the military-backed party of USDP only received 6.4% of the votes. Even though the election was free, fair election, the military claim was this election was fraudulent, right? And also, the military is removed democratically elected government NLD early this year. Since then, protesters of the NLD supporter or the general civilians, they have been arrested. They've been arrested, tortured, imprisonment. There's countless number of people, despite gross violation of human rights by the military. The global communities has failed to have united voice in renouncing coup. For example, China and Russia blocked the UN Security Council from condemning the coup. Why do you think is the reason, and for what? For that?
Well, you've outlined some very important issues here. I mean, it certainly was clear that the National League for Democracy did win the November 2020 election. And that election was found to be broadly free and fair. I mean, there were still some problems with it, but nothing like what the military has alleged in the Global New Day of Myanmar, where they're claiming there were massive numbers of fraudulent votes. And it's quite clear also that the various different election monitoring organizations, including the international organizations, found that the election was broadly free and fair. So we have had the toppling of a democratically elected government by a military coup. And you would expect that that would be condemned globally by governments around the world. And I think at the beginning of this, in early February and into March, we saw a lot of momentum from the international community. We had the UN Secretary General, Mr. Guterres, speaking up against the coup. We had various different governments saying this will not stand. But the reality is that when it was taken to the UN Security Council, we once again saw the kind of deadlock that has made the UN Security Council such a problematic body for bringing issues to be resolved. And, we've seen this with Syria. We've seen this with other countries where there are crises, and it's essentially deadlocked. And in this specific case, we have two of the veto-wielding permanent members of the Security Council, Russia and China, who are prepared to back the Myanmar junta and who have threatened to veto any sort of resolution that is brought forward that is not to their liking. And that threat has been enough to prevent the United Kingdom, Great Britain, from bringing a resolution forward. The UK is the pen holder at the UN Security Council for any sort of resolutions related to Burma. And we've tried and basically lobbied and advocated with the British till we're blue in the face to try to get them to move a resolution. And they are just unwilling to do so. They have said very clearly that they don't want to lose at the UN Security Council, that they view a veto by Russia or China and or both countries would be devastating for the Burmese democracy movement. And we have said repeatedly that, at the beginning of this crisis, it was, of course, enough to have some statements and, have some meetings and have, in one case, a president's statement, but now is the time for real action. The UN Security Council is the one body that can refer the crimes against humanity that have been committed by the Tatmadaw and by the police against the people of Myanmar. They're the one body that can refer Myanmar to the International Criminal Court for accountability. And this is the thing that the Myanmar's military junta and the generals, Min Aung Hlaing on down, are really afraid of. They are concerned that they will be held accountable in front of an international judicial body. This is one of the reasons they're so worried about the International Court of Justice and the ongoing proceedings against Myanmar in that Court of Justice about the alleged genocide against the Rohingya people. So there is a strong fear within the military of Myanmar about international justice mechanisms. And we need now to really actionize this by pushing further the UN Security Council and trying to get Russia and China to recognize they have interests in letting something go forward. What we're seeing is China is primarily interested in maintaining the status quo in Myanmar. They want to protect their pipeline and their transport corridor. Of course, they're setting up their port at Jokpyu in Rakhine State, which is going to provide them with the warm water port that China has always wanted for forced projection into the Indian Ocean. And for Russia, they are eager to continue to sell arms, basically helicopters, planes, and other military equipment to the junta. And both of those countries are more than happy to cause problems for the European Union, the US, and others who are the countries that have been trying to press for action at the Security Council. So you have a deadlock, and it's very difficult to see how this will be changed. We've not had a resolution that has been vetoed. It's different from Syria, where there has been numerous resolutions brought in that have been vetoed at the Security Council by Russia. But, we do anticipate that there could be an effort to draft a resolution. If we can finally just persuade Britain to demonstrate the political commitment that they need to move forward with something and at least force Russia and China to formally stand up and defend the indefensible, which is what the Burmese military is doing to the people of Myanmar. The over 1,000 people that have been shot and killed, the over 6,000 people who have been detained by the military junta, many of them facing indefinite detention and torture and custody. These are things that, the international community needs to speak of and needs to press the Myanmar military to stop. And it won't happen unless Russia and China are prepared to step aside and allow for a resolution to proceed at the UN Security Council.
Thank you very much. This is a very good update, and thanks for your perspective. So when we talked, you earlier you mentioned about the International Court of Justice, hold the military accountable for the crime it had committed, right? Thousands of people killed. Many people are arrested, imprisonment. It's not that happening today. It is the the violation of human rights that happened when under the NLD government. You remember last year when I think it's 2020, NLD government is defending the rights to the military give them protection to the military coup. So do you think it's like NUG government will be raising the question or advocating on behalf of the people, not just currently? It happened last 2 years, 3 years, 5 years ago, all the human rights violations. So what do you think, what is your perspective on that when it comes to International Court of Justice, held accountable for Myanmar coup, not only today's incidents, was the earlier years, many years ago, like for example, 2012, 2019, 2020, in Rakhine State, many people they killed.
Yes.
People are traumatized. I feel so sorry for the Arakan state, the people of Arakan state, how they've been going through. So, what is your recommendation? What is your advice to the new government, or it's called NUG government, making sure that held accountable, not just what happened? Majority Burmese are killed and tortured. It was killed and tortured in many states, minority states like Kachin, Karen state. It's constant, not only this year, and most of their entire life.
Well, it's quite clear that there is a long history of the Tatmadaw attacking ethnic minorities. This goes back, literally decades. It's very interesting that when we saw the attacks against the Rohingya, and particularly the atrocities, the mass rape, the gang rapes, and the other abuses of Rohingya women, that the first people to respond to that, even before this current period where people are now recognizing that the way the Rohingya was treated, it was wrong. But even back in 2017, 2018, you saw solidarity coming from the Karen Women's Organization, or the Karenni Women's Organization, or the Kachin and the Shan Women's Organization, because they said what the Tatmadaw is doing to the Rohingya women now is what they did to us previously when they came into our ethnic areas. And so I think there's a recognition now that it is the Tatmadaw that is really the enemy of all the peoples of Myanmar, and that these ethnic divides that have continued have served as a distraction and have allowed the Burmese military to play a divide and rule game against the various different ethnic minorities. And that finally we're seeing some progress where people are starting to recognize that all the ethnic peoples have to work together to ultimately end the military rule.
Thank you. Because of last year, there's incidents, Rakhine woman was raped. There's unreported cases out there, a lot, right?
Mm-hmm.
So most of my minorities are raped, tortured, murdered, and killed. Gross violations is there. Now is the majority who are the population, where people are minorities and majority, the both parties, both population victims of this by the military coup. So is there anything that people needs to reconciliation like that, understanding majority of Burmese that, we are suffering today, not only us, the ethnic minorities, they suffer for decades. Do they have that kind of, mindset, that more empathetic about this?
I think that is. See, this is one of the positive things that has come from this. There are very few positive things, but one positive thing that has come is that there's a greater understanding, particularly amongst the youth and others, that, for instance, the way that the Rohingya were treated was wrong. The atrocities against them was wrong. And the people of Myanmar, the Pama and others who, refused to stand up and say this is wrong at that time, that they were wrong. So I think that, there is a growing solidarity gradually between the various different ethnic organizations and ethnic groups. Certainly we have seen people saying things now, like, we're sorry, we should have done something. They're saying that to the Rohingya people. We've seen protests that, have spoken out for the Rohingya and said, okay, the Rohingya are our brothers and our sisters, just like Dr. Sasa says that all the time. And if you actually look at the composition of the National Unity Government, there has been real progress in recognizing that it's not just about the Burman MPs in the NLD, but it is also about the ethnic leadership and the ethnic organizations, that there has to be some common cause to build a truly federal democracy. It's quite clear if you look at the Tatmadaw's policies, if you look at their entire mindset, they have been the enemy of federalism all along. we were all scratching our heads and trying to figure out why Aung San Suu Kyi was going along with efforts by the military to sort of undermine the various Panglong conferences and other things that she was talking about. Because at every step of the way, she was saying we want to do these things, but, the military was sabotaging it every step of the way. And I think that now people are started waking up. And it took a military coup for everybody to finally realize that, who is the real enemy of democracy? Who is the real enemy of human rights? Who is the enemy of the 10 years of progress, however sort of sporadic it was at times under the NLD. I mean, you had 10 years of freedom of association, freedom of expression, freedom of peaceful public assembly. You had basic rights guaranteed, although it wasn't all the rights that were guaranteed. But you had broad progress. You had economic progress. You had foreign investment. It started to look like Myanmar was heading in the right direction. And when in one fell swoop, the military under Min Aung Hlaing have undone all of that. And they're trying to drag the country back to the military dictatorships of yesteryear. And everybody remembers how bad it was during those times. It was bad economically, bad in terms of human rights. It was bad in terms of the abuses faced by the ethnic peoples. And no one wants to go back to that. And that's why you have such a systematic and widespread opposition that has come up under the umbrella of the CDM that is going to say, we're not going back to that. We're not going to let you, the Tatmadaw, drag Myanmar back into a dark past that we are all happy was gone with, and that we're not going to go back to that. And I think that, is true not only in sort of the Burman areas, but also true in many of the ethnic areas as well, that there were certain freedoms and things that people got used to. People got used to having internet on their phone. People got used to being able to read the daily news and see something real. People got used to being able to talk again in tea shops and say what they thought without worrying about someone over their shoulder hearing them. Those are things that are now been lost.
Thank you. So there is some kind of clash between the some other group, right? Some groups, they already joined with the movement of NUG CDM movement. Some groups, they did not join because of some political, historical, some issue that there is the experiences, right? So the ethnic minorities areas, they are majority of they believe that even though military versus NLD government, they are one day they will be sharing their power, maybe some win-win solution. Even the military or NLD government, they can share their power. But how about the minorities? Of course, they don't have voice, they don't have the solution, they don't have hope, right? This is the reason why some other minorities did not join this movement. We cannot blame them because we need to look at their historical data or historical evidence event that they experiences not only this movement, many years, generation like that, right? So my question to you that, again, I'm repeating again, NLD, NUG is represent the part of the NLD and democratic government from Myanmar.
Yes.
Right? So how NUG react to being held accountable? The atrocities took place, not this movement, what happened earlier. So do you think they will be taking accountable for that?
Well, accountability is not something we've seen very frequently in Myanmar. I mean, I hate to say that, but that's the truth of it. What I would say is that the NUG, I think, is trying to make a break with the past. So, for instance, they have filed an intent for Myanmar to be covered by the International Criminal Court and by the Rome Statute. They've said that we agreed to be bound by this. They've said that we're, reaching out to the Rohingya and to the Rakhine and to the Kachin and to the others who have faced abuses and that they're going to try to fix those issues. They are trying to say that, by including some of these ethnic ministers in some of the top levels of NUG, we are now trying to address the lack of voice that many ethnic people have felt was the situation in previous governments. That these were governments that were by the Burmans for the Burmans, And certainly I think that there was a feeling that Aung San Suu Kyi certainly was a disappointment on this. Many people, I remember very clearly, many people before she took power along the Thai Burma border, many of the ethnic leaders said, okay, well, she's a Burman, but we'll give her the benefit of the doubt. We'll trust her to try to do the right thing. And ultimately, she failed to do the right thing. She, in many cases, simply failed to deal significantly or systematically with the ethnic dilemmas. She was doing other things, whatever they were. But, she wasn't paying attention the way she was, and she certainly wasn't doing the kind of outreach that she should have done. Be that as it may, what we're seeing now with the NUG and through the participation of the various parliamentarians who were elected, constituted in the CRPH, that you have the possibility of an NLD that does respect and listen to and engage with the minority groups, the ethnic groups, the groups who have traditionally been dispossessed. And that, I would hope that, if in the future the NLD leadership who are currently imprisoned in Myanmar are released and allowed to come back, that they will uphold those obligations for a truly federal constitution and for a participatory political process that will end discrimination and treat all ethnics with respect, and ultimately provide for a change in the way citizenship is thought of in Myanmar, so that you don't have people held hostage to a list of 135 ethnic groups. That's just basing something on like ethnicity when you have people who are born in the country, who have lived all their lives in the country, who have very clearly said, Myanmar is the only place I've known, like the Rohingya right now, who are all eager to come back if they had basic protections and guarantees provided to them in international monitoring and, an opportunity to pursue livelihoods while also having protection. If they had all those things, they'd come back tomorrow en masse. Because they say, we're from Myanmar. We are Myanmarese. We are Burmese. We deserve to be recognized. And our view is that, yes, they should do away with the discriminatory 1982 Citizenship Act and come up with a new legal definition for citizenship in Myanmar that is non-discriminatory and includes everyone. And basically work on that basis towards a reconciliation, not only between the Burmans and various ethnic groups, but among the ethnic groups as well. And in Rakhine State, really sort of looking at how do we implement some of the recommendations of the Kofi Annan Commission, which the Myanmar military and also previously the Suu Kyi government was claiming had been largely implemented, but in the fact they weren't, and everybody knows they weren't.
Well, I have one question. When you brought up today's show is most about Burma, but I'm glad that you bring highlight on Rakhine State, Arakan State, right? So now is the Burma whole the nation, many places, many states, there's lots of going on, right, currently. So in Rakhine State, more stable. None of any citizen or any individual in Arakan State, there is no human rights violation, no killings. I'm very thankful to see that people are safer. But what is your view on the current Rakhine State, Arakan State? Is there any violation? Have you ever heard anything like that this year?
Well, there's a couple different parts of this. I I mean, I think that there are still violations happening against Rakhine people. And certainly there are still violations happening against the remaining Rohingya people who are locked down in internally displaced persons camps, without access to livelihoods, without access to basic services. We did a report last year which examined the conditions that those people, the Rohingya in Rakhine State, are living under, so 600,000 people. And we found, frankly, that those are conditions that are crimes, the way that they're being treated, and it's the crimes of apartheid and persecution. And so there has to be a fundamental change to that. I think in terms of the coup and what is happening with Rakhine State, the Myanmar military, the Tatmadaw, has recognized that the Arakan army is a very formidable opponent, and that they were already having a very difficult time with the Arakan army in Rakhine State, and I think this is quite obvious. This is not saying anything that people don't already know. What we've seen is the military junta essentially bargaining with the Arakan army and saying, "Look, we've got to do something else. We're doing these other things. We're going to let you alone in Rakhine State. We're going to sign this ceasefire. If you uphold the ceasefire, we won't cause you any problems." It's because the Tatmadaw is busy trying to repress rights in the rest of the country. And my fear is that if, in fact, they do succeed in destroying the CDM, and if they do succeed in trying to control the people in other parts of the country, once they've done that, then they will turn their attention back to Rakhine State, to Arakan State, and they will turn their attention and hostility back at the Arakan army. Because I don't think that it's not like the Tatmadaw woke up one day and they said, "Oh, the Arakan army is my best friend." That's not the case. Quite clearly, they are concerned about the Arakan army, but they realize that they cannot fight a multi-front battle. And so they have to basically sue for peace in one place temporarily while they deal with the PDFs and others in other parts of the country that have been causing them so many problems.
Thanks. What I have observed, I'm observing the people from Arakan. Majority of people they feel very safe and secure currently, emotionally. Yes. Even though COVID-19 and many lockdown, many difficulties. Because when I ask people, what is the reason why? And I had many discussions with the many people, that political leaders, many generation, many government from Myanmar, they rule this state, right? Always people from Arakan had lots of human rights violations. When you look at military coup, when under the military NLD government, from 2012, many people, countless people died. 2012, 16, 2019, and 20. So when we look at the picture, very interesting that why is Arakan State is very peaceful today. And I think it's all credits goes to the Arakan army. Have you ever heard that they are taking over the state that for more peaceful commitment, peaceful society, peaceful the coexistence and people harmony. So do you have any credit and to the under control of Arakan army that people are in Arakan are safer than before than the military Aung San Suu Kyi government or military coup? What is
my view about it is that the Arakan army at this point is being allowed by the Tatmadaw to come in and basically operate without hindrance in Rakhine State. And, it's like basically the Tatmadaw pulled back. They pulled back from Rakhine State because they need to send their troops elsewhere. They need to fight the PDFs in Chin State and Sagaing and other places like that. And that is what is happening. You have skirmishes between these local, People's Defense Force groups coming up all over the country against the military and the police. And so, by stepping back and allowing Arakan army to basically come in and fill the void, to not, to end the fighting because there's not a ceasefire going on, they're allowing the situation to proceed. But my caution would be that I don't think that the the Myanmar government is serious about making this a permanent situation. I don't think that they support the kind of demands for autonomy or separate state that Arakan army has made. And, eventually the Tatmadaw are going to come back, and they're going to come back to fight. And so I would say to the Rakhine people, yes, things are going well now for you, better than they're in other places like that. Enjoy it while it lasts. But I think that over a longer period of time, the Myanmar military will be back, and they'll be back in their traditional form, causing problems for local people, displacing people, attacking civilians, doing all the things that the Tatmadaw are so infamous for, all the rights abuses and all the way that they treat the people wherever they happen to be and whatever ethnic state they happen to be.
Thanks. So now is the last 2020 and 19, right? There is a very hot issue on the global stage on the people, international communities talking about more about the ICJs and then Rakhine State, Arakan State, right? Mm-hmm. So after this year, when the coup is taken over, the people, international community shift their attention. Instead of Rakhine State, they're more focusing on Burma, other part of the world, right? So for my observation as a human rights activist, for me, it's very important that people at the peace moment, right? People of Arakan, they are in peaceful moment. There is no ethnic tension. There is no fight. There is no human rights violation. There is zero ethnic clashes, right? Between the people living with harmony and peace. And I'm very thankful those leaders who are currently standing people of Arakan. And my appreciation goes to all the people of Arakan that bringing peaceful coexistence, live peacefully, support during the COVID-19 and difficult time. They are getting along and working towards the national harmony, right? So do you think it's international communities support instead of, something else and support the making for long-lasting peace in Arakan that because of now everybody is all international communities neglect about Arakan State. I think it's my observation and I'm calling for international communities, including your agencies and others, right? Making sure that help the Arakan State for the peace and prosperity, for the long-lasting peace and prosperities.
Well, what I would say is that Arakan State is not going to have sustainable peace and prosperity unless there's a larger solution within Myanmar about how the military are dealt with. There has to be accountability, and it has to include Rakhine State. We're saying that there has to be also accountability for what happened to the Rohingya in 2012, in 2016 and 2017. There has to be justice for the Rakhine who faced abuses at the hands of the Tatmadaw as they were trying to suppress the Arakan army and where civilians were targeted in typical Tatmadaw fashion. So we need to have that kind of accountability. We need to have that kind of justice. We need that kind of system in the larger country. It's not going to be possible for Arakan to be permanently peaceful and sort of remain out of the fray while the rest of the country is burning, because of the fights between the PDF and the military, and because of the ongoing resistance of the CDM. And so, Rakhine State may be getting a break right now. They may have a sort of a quiet period now when they are able to catch their breath and try to improve the situation. But it is not going to last without a larger solution. And let me be very clear that for the Rohingya who remain in Rakhine State, and we're talking about 600,000 people, their lives have not improved in any way. They are locked down in those internally displaced persons camps. They are not allowed to leave. They do not have livelihoods. People are dying of preventable diseases. Food rations, food security is all based on the access of international NGOs and UN agencies to those camps. And Of course, with COVID-19, that access has been restricted. And certainly because of the previous fighting, it's been restricted. So people are really in a bad situation in those internally displaced persons camps. And Rakhine State cannot simply sweep the problem of the remaining Rohingya and also the ethnic Kaman. There's a number of Kaman who are still being held in these camps as well. The full citizens of Myanmar.
Adding to that, there is many Rakhine, hundreds of Rakhine in the camp, many camps still, not
yes,
only.
Yes, that's true too.
All together.
Yeah, well, I think there are IDP camps of ethnic Rakhine, but the difference is that the ethnic Rakhine, when they've been displaced for an area, when the fighting stops, they're often able to go back to those areas. Whereas for instance, the Kaman and the Rohingya, the Kaman, for instance, who were displaced from their homes in Jokpyu back in 2012, in October, are still in an internally displaced persons camp, and they can't go back. And when the ethnic Kaman were in other IDP camps that were closed, and they asked to go back to their homes, they were instead given a bus ticket to Rangoon and told to resettle as on the outskirts of Yangon. So, I mean, there is still no justice for the remaining Rohingya and Kaman in Rakhine State. And the ethnic Rakhine people, of course, have also suffered greatly at the hands of the Tepeda. So there's a lot of suffering going around in Rakhine State.
You're right, because of there is many camps many IDPs cannot go back. There is some reason. There is a mine last 2 years, the land mine everywhere. They cannot cultivate the land and their livelihood. So that's also another risk factors as well. But I don't see any international organization is instead of like appointing peoples and organization like that. None of them, they're focusing on the clearing landmine. And
it's just not stable enough at this point. I mean, ultimately what you would have is, if there is a permanent ceasefire that is something that is stabilized, then you would have a number of the humanitarian demining organizations that would come in to work with the various different local government officials and others. But because there's not that stability at this point, they're not going to go in. And again, issues of access are pretty fundamental as well. There's still a major problem there.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your time. We really appreciate. I hope today's discussion will be a lot. Viewers will clear your perspective on the situation in Arakan. And thank you for your time. And we really appreciate your sacrificing your time here being with us. And I hope you will continue to have more discussion with us. And our viewers really wants you to come sometime and have more thoughts on that issue. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much for having me on the show. And your viewers, if they want to see more of our research on what is happening in Myanmar, they can look at our website, hrw.org /Myanmar. And, obviously we're going to continue to work very strong to ensure that rights are respected and democracy restored in Myanmar, and that the people who have committed rights abuses are held accountable, no matter who they are, no matter how prominent they are, no matter, what their rank is. There has to be accountability for rights abuses if Myanmar is going to change and move forward into the future as a rights-respecting democratic state.
Thank you. So, Talizaba, if you need a brother along with Jesus Myagi Temare, now let Jaro the crowd and Samudi and Sepame, Jesus Myagi Temare. Very good. Your perspective sometimes is people